The red marker slammed against the whiteboard so hard it cracked in half. Robert Morrison stood frozen for a heartbeat, staring at the broken pieces in his hand like evidence of a crime he'd just committed. 61 years old, CEO of a billion-dollar company, and 47 hours without sleep, running on coffee that had stopped working around dawn yesterday. His hand shook slightly as he set the broken marker on the conference table. Not from caffeine, from the bone-deep certainty that he was about to lose everything. The conference room at Nexus Defense Solutions felt like a tomb. 20 engineers sat motionless around the table, their faces pale under the fluorescent lights. Harvard diplomas, MIT credentials, Stanford PhDs. Every single one of them had published papers, spoken at conferences, built systems that had changed industries. And not one of them could look him in the eye. Bobby's reflection stared back from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's skyline. The city glittered 11 stories below, alive with people who'd figured out how to balance work and life, while he stood in an empty conference room at midnight, choosing the company over everything else again. His expensive suit hung loose on a frame that had lost 10 pounds in the last month. Gray hair pulled back tight enough to make his scalp ache. Eyes with dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide anymore. Dr. James Brennan cleared his throat. 23 years in artificial intelligence research, PhD from Caltech, salary of $425,000 a year, not counting stock options. He typed something on his laptop and the main screen flickered to life. Numbers cascaded down in neat columns. Every single metric showed red. The neural network is hitting resistance in the decision tree architecture. Brennan's voice carried the careful neutrality of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. We've recalibrated the weighted nodes 17 times, adjusted the learning parameters across 43 iterations, restructured the entire algorithmic framework from the ground up. English, James. Bobby's voice came out quieter than he intended. Dangerous quiet. Brennan's jaw tightened. He'd spent 3 days trying to save this project. 3 days of his team working around the clock, ordering takeout at midnight, sleeping under their desks, and he had nothing to show for it except bags under his eyes and the growing certainty that they were all about to be fired. It's broken. His voice cracked slightly on the words. And we don't know why. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush bone. Bobby turned slowly to face the room. 20 pairs of eyes found suddenly fascinating things to look at. The table, their laptops, the coffee stains on the whiteboard, anywhere but at the man who'd built this company from nothing, when every venture capitalist in San Francisco told him he was too old, too late, too stubborn to compete with the kids in Silicon Valley. Do you know what General Harding told me yesterday? Bobby's hands pressed flat against the table, steadying himself against the exhaustion that threatened to pull him under. He said if we don't deliver a working system by Thursday at 10 a.m., the contract goes to Meridian Technologies. All $100 million of it. He let the number hang in the air. 100 million. 3 years of development, 200 employees whose jobs depended on this contract, and his own reputation built over decades, about to crumble because the system they'd promised the military couldn't tell the difference between a supply convoy and a school bus. Do you know what happens when we lose a $100 million defense contract? We don't just lose money. We lose credibility. We lose every future contract. We lose the company. His phone buzzed against the table. A text from his daughter, Jennifer. The preview showed a photo, a drawing in crayon, stick figures holding hands. Grandpa and Mia, the caption read. She's been carrying this around for a week, waiting to give it to you. When are you coming to visit? It's been 4 months, Dad. Bobby shoved the phone in his pocket without opening the full message. 4 months since he'd seen his 8-year-old granddaughter. 4 months of promising next weekend, next month, as soon as this project stabilizes. And now the project was dying, and he still hadn't made time for a little girl who thought her grandfather had forgotten she existed. "Everyone out." Bobby straightened, CEO mask sliding back into place. "Don't come back until you have something that works. I don't care if you have to rebuild it from scratch. Figure it out." They fled. 20 brilliant minds scrambling for the door like students dismissed from detention. All except Rachel Foster, his VP of operations, and the only person in this building who'd ever seen him cry. Rachel lingered near the door, her hand on the frame. "You should go home." Rachel's voice carried the gentle insistence of someone who'd been having this argument for years. "See Mia. She's 8 now, Bobby. These years don't come back." Bobby didn't answer. Couldn't answer because the truth was he didn't know how to be a grandfather. He knew how to run board meetings and close deals and fire people who weren't performing. But sitting on the floor playing tea party with stuffed animals required a kind of presence he'd forgotten how to access. "I'll see her when I've saved her inheritance." The words came out harsher than intended. "And if you work yourself to death first?" Rachel didn't wait for an answer. The door clicked shut behind her, and Bobby was alone. The city glittered through the windows. 11:47 at night, and Seattle was still alive. Restaurants full of people having dinner with their families. Movie theaters where couples held hands in the dark. Living rooms where grandparents read bedtime stories to children who would remember their voices forever. An entire world of people who'd figured out how to balance work and life, while Bobby stood in an empty conference room at midnight, choosing the company over everything else again. When did I become this person? The thought arrived unbidden. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger, a man who traded his family for success and was only now realizing the exchange rate had bankrupted him. The phone buzzed again. Jennifer calling this time. Bobby stared at the screen until it went to voicemail, then listened to the message with his forehead pressed against the cold glass. "Dad, you actually picked up voicemail." The disappointment in Jennifer's voice hurt worse than anger would have. "Mia was waiting up for you to call, but it's almost midnight and she fell asleep on the couch. She asked me tonight why Grandpa doesn't love her anymore." Bobby's chest seized. "I told her that's not true, that Grandpa loves her very much, that Grandpa is just very busy." Jennifer paused. "But Dad, she's 8. She doesn't understand busy. She just understands not here." The message ended. Bobby stood in the darkness of his corner office, surrounded by awards and achievements and 40 years of proving everyone wrong. And he had never felt more alone in his life. You can build an empire for your children. The thought formed slowly, painfully. But what good is the empire if your children are gone? Sarah Catherine Williams pushed her cleaning cart through the executive floor with the efficiency of a woman who'd perfected the art of being furniture. Gray uniform, worn work boots, one earbud in her left ear playing nothing, because she'd learned years ago that people left you alone if you looked occupied. The other ear stayed free to listen for footsteps, voices, any sign that someone might need her to be even more invisible than usual. 52 years old, white woman with graying brown hair and calloused hands that had spent over a decade holding mops instead of the research papers she'd once dreamed of publishing. Single mother to an 8-year-old daughter who thought her mom was the smartest person in the world and had no idea she'd once been 2 semesters away from a PhD at MIT. The soft Tennessee drawl she'd grown up with in Nashville still colored her words when she was tired, making executives dismiss her as uneducated when they bothered to notice her at all. The executive floor at this hour was a ghost town. Just the hum of servers in the data center and the occasional security guard making rounds. Kate had worked this shift for 3 years and could walk every hallway blindfolded. She knew which offices had personal photos on the desks, which engineers left their code visible on their monitors, which bathrooms ran out of soap by Thursday and needed early refills. She knew everything about Nexus Technologies except how to stop being overlooked long enough to matter. Kate rounded the corner toward the main conference room and stopped. The lights were still on. That was unusual. Most nights, by 11:30, the place was dark except for the emergency exits and the red glow of charging stations. She approached the glass walls cautiously, prepared to turn around if someone was still working late. The room was empty now, but the whiteboards made Kate forget about her cart, forget about staying unnoticed. Her hand caught the door handle, and she stepped inside without thinking, drawn forward by something she hadn't felt since the night Michael had died in that car crash. Recognition. The equations covering every inch of whiteboard space weren't random corporate brainstorming. They were advanced neural network architecture, decision tree mapping, algorithmic structures she'd once understood the way other people understood their native language. And in the center of the main board, circled in angry red marker with slash marks cutting through it like a murder scene, was a problem that made her heart stop. They're using linear regression on an exponential growth model. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The weighted nodes aren't accounting for temporal decay. The feedback loop is completely ignoring real-world chaos. Kate stepped closer. Her reflection in the whiteboard showed a middle-aged woman in a faded uniform, but her mind was moving at speeds it hadn't reached since Michael died, and the future she'd planned had shattered into pieces too small to reassemble. The solution was obvious. So obvious 20 PhDs had missed it. Then again, they'd been trained to see problems as things to conquer. Kate had been trained by life to see systems as things to understand. There was a difference. Not your problem. The voice in her head sounded like Michael. Not your job. Clean the board and move on. Her hand was shaking when she picked up the eraser, raised it toward the whiteboard, and couldn't do it. Over a decade of reading every paper she could find in the public library after her shift ended, teaching herself new frameworks on used textbooks she bought at Goodwill, solving theoretical problems in her head while mopping floors because her brain refused to let go of the work she'd loved more than anything except her husband and daughter. Years of watching her knowledge rust while life demanded she choose survival over growth. And here, written in red marker like a gift from a universe that owed her several, was the kind of problem she used to solve before breakfast. "What are you doing?" her brain screamed at her. "You're going to get fired. Emma needs to eat. You have rent due in 5 days." But her hand was already moving toward the red marker lying on the table, already picking it up, already testing its weight like a weapon she'd once wielded with precision. 5 minutes. That's all it would take. Swap the regression model for a sigmoid function. Redistribute the weighted nodes across the temporal axis. Add a feedback loop that accounts for chaos theory principles instead of trying to impose order on inherently random systems. 5 minutes to prove she wasn't irrelevant. 5 minutes to remember what it felt like to be good at something that mattered. Michael's voice in her memory. The promise she'd made him in that ICU while holding his hand so tight it hurt. 6 months pregnant with Emma while he lay dying from injuries no surgeon could fix. When the door opens, Katie, not if, when. His Tennessee drawl had been thick with morphine and certainty. When the door opens, walk through it. Promise me. Don't let fear make you small. Her hand was steady when she touched marker to board, steadier than it had been in years. The equations flowed out like muscle memory. Sigmoid correction here. Temporal decay compensation there. A complete restructure of the feedback architecture that would let the system learn from chaos instead of breaking against it. When Kate stepped back, The solution was so elegant it hurt. The kind of work she dreamed of doing when she was 25 and brilliant and certain she was going to change the world, before the world had reminded her that brilliance meant nothing compared to being there when the people you loved were dying. She wiped her hands on her uniform. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it echoing in the empty room.
The rational part of her brain was screaming to erase everything, to clean it off before anyone saw, before she lost the only job keeping a roof over Emma's head. But the part of her that had spent over a decade buried under survival instincts couldn't bring herself to destroy this. Couldn't erase proof that Kate Williams was more than a woman who cleaned toilets for people who wouldn't remember her name if asked. "What the hell are you doing?" Kate spun around. Robert Morrison stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes locked on the whiteboard, then on her. His expression was unreadable, exhaustion mixed with something sharper. Curiosity, maybe. Or calculation. The room felt smaller suddenly. Kate became acutely aware of her gray uniform, the mop bucket still visible through the glass walls, the name tag that said supervisor in block letters instead of her actual name because someone in HR 3 years ago had decided individual janitor names didn't matter. "You're the night supervisor." Morrison's voice wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the precision of someone categorizing a problem to be solved. "Yes, sir." Kate's throat felt dry. "I was just cleaning and I saw the problem and I thought, you saw a $100 million algorithm failing and decided to fix it with your mop." Morrison walked past her, not toward her, past her like she was furniture to navigate around. His eyes scanned the whiteboard with laser focus. Every correction she'd made, every adjustment to their failed architecture. "I'm sorry." Kate heard the words coming out of her mouth from very far away. "I shouldn't have touched it. I'll wipe it clean right now. I can—" "Don't move." Morrison pulled out his phone, started photographing the whiteboard from multiple angles. His fingers flew across the screen with practiced efficiency, sending the images somewhere, to someone. "Sir, please." Kate felt the ground shifting under her feet, felt over a decade of careful invisibility crumbling because she'd been stupid enough to believe she could matter again. "I can't lose this job. I have a daughter. She's 8 years old. She's all I have. I'm all she has." Morrison didn't look at her. He was still studying the whiteboard, still photographing. His phone rang and he answered without taking his eyes off her corrections. "Rachel, conference room now, emergency." He hung up. The silence stretched. Kate's mind raced through scenarios. How fast she'd have to find another job. Whether Mrs. Kowalski would give her a few weeks on the rent. How she'd explain to Emma why Mommy couldn't afford her field trip to the Science Museum next month. "What's your name again?" Morrison finally turned to face her. "Kate. Kate Williams." "Where did you study?" "I didn't. I mean, I started at MIT, but I never finished. My husband died. I had to drop out to take care of our baby." Something shifted in Morrison's expression. Not pity. Kate had learned to recognize pity, and this wasn't it. This was the look of someone recalculating an equation. MIT. Really? Morrison's eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "You were at MIT studying what exactly?" "Machine learning and neural network architecture. But that was over a decade ago, before life happened, before everything changed." The door burst open. Rachel Foster rushed in, still pulling on her jacket over what looked like pajamas. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were alert despite the hour. "Bobby, what's wrong? Did something happen with the system? Tell me what you see." Morrison pointed at the whiteboard. Rachel's eyes scanned the equations. Confusion melted into recognition. Recognition hardened into disbelief. Her hand went to her mouth, This is sigmoid correction with temporal decay compensation. Rachel's voice came out barely above a whisper. If this actually works, it would solve the feedback loop problem completely.
It would solve everything we've been breaking our heads over for 3 days. She turned to Kate, really looked at her for the first time. The gray uniform, the mop bucket, the weathered hands of someone who'd spent years doing manual labor instead of intellectual work. The supervisor did this. Rachel looked between Kate and Morrison like she was waiting for the punchline. The supervisor, Morrison confirmed. His expression was still unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it, Kate could see the steel that had built a billion-dollar company from nothing. That's impossible. Rachel pulled out her tablet. This is PhD-level work, senior researcher level. This is... Run it. Morrison's voice cut through Rachel's spiral. Right now, run the simulation with her corrections and tell me if it works. Rachel's hands shook slightly as she input the new parameters. The tablet screen loaded, processed. Kate held her breath. Emma's face flashed through her mind. The way she smiled when Kate walked through the door at 7 a.m. sharp every morning. The way she trusted her mom to always be there, even when Kate felt like she was failing at everything else. The tablet beeped. Green bars filled the screen where red ones had been moments before. Rachel stared at the numbers like they were written in a language she didn't know. Error reduction, 67%. Her voice broke. Processing speed increase, 44%. Bobby, it works. The silence was absolute. Kate felt something cracking open in her chest. Something that had been locked away since Michael died because hope was too expensive when you were choosing between rent and groceries. Who are you? Morrison's voice was quiet now. Dangerous quiet. And I want the truth this time. Not the just a janitor story. The real story. Kate looked at the whiteboard, at her corrections written in red marker. At years of knowledge that had never gone away, just gone dormant, waiting for someone to ask the right question. I was going to change the world. Her voice came out rough. That was the plan. Finish my PhD at MIT, join a research lab, build AI systems that actually help people. She paused. The memories hurt. They always hurt. Then Michael died in a car crash. We had a 6-month-old daughter, no insurance, medical bills and funeral costs that made my student loans look like pocket change. So I made a choice. I could stay in school and let someone else hold my daughter's hand while she grew up, or I could drop out and be there for every single moment. Rachel was crying quietly. Morrison's face had gone very still. I dropped out 2 semesters before finishing. Took every job I could find. Worked my way up to supervisor because at least that came with health insurance for Emma. She paused, throat closing. And all the while I kept learning, reading papers at the library, teaching myself new frameworks, solving problems in my head because my brain refused to believe I was done. How old is your daughter? Morrison's voice was softer now, almost gentle. 8. Same age as your granddaughter, I think. I've seen the photos on your desk when I empty your trash. Morrison went very still. Kate hadn't meant to reveal that she paid attention to the personal details of executives' lives, that she knew from the dates on his calendar that he kept canceling trips to visit family, that sometimes late at night when she was cleaning the hallway outside his office, she could hear him making calls that ended with him saying he'd visit soon, knowing he wouldn't. What's her name? Morrison asked. Emma, after Michael's grandmother. Does Emma know about MIT? About who you used to be? Kate shook her head. She knows I work nights. She knows I'm always there at 7 a.m. to make breakfast and braid her hair and walk her to the bus stop. That's enough.
That has to be enough. Is it? The question hit harder than Kate expected. Morrison sat down in one of the conference room chairs, not at the head of the table where the CEO usually commanded meetings. Just a regular chair, like a regular person. Sit down, Ms. Williams. Kate sat. The chair felt wrong, too comfortable, too much like she belonged in rooms like this instead of cleaning them. Morrison leaned forward, elbows on the table. 40 years of corporate warfare in his eyes. But underneath it, something more human. Something that recognized pain because it had felt its own version. I'm going to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest. Can you do that again? Look at another problem and solve it. What kind of problem? Kate's heart was pounding again. The kind worth $100 million. The kind that decides whether this company survives or dies. Kate thought about Emma. About over a decade of being overlooked. And one night of finally being seen. I'd need to see the full system architecture. I'd need access to the existing code base. I'd need... Done. Morrison didn't hesitate. You'll have whatever you need. I don't have security clearance. I don't have credentials. I don't have... You have results, Ms. Williams. Morrison's eyes held hers. The paperwork says you're not qualified, but that whiteboard says you're exactly who I need. I trust the whiteboard. Kate felt the weight of the decision pressing down, felt the fear that had kept her small since Michael died, screaming that this was too big, too risky, too likely to end in failure that would prove everyone right about her being a washed-up dropout. I need to be home by 7 a.m. The words came out firm. Every morning, no exceptions. Emma needs me to be there. That's non-negotiable. Morrison nodded slowly. Then we work around your schedule, whatever it takes. And if I can't actually solve it? If tonight was just luck? If I'm not as good as I used to be? Then you'll have tried. Morrison's voice was steady, which is more than most people do, which is more than I can say I've done for the things that actually matter. He stood up, extended his hand across the table. Kate looked at it. At the perfectly manicured nails and expensive watch and everything it represented. A door opening. A chance to prove she wasn't just a woman who cleaned floors. A risk that could destroy the fragile stability she'd built for Emma, or could finally give them both something better. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, confident. The handshake of someone who'd learned to project certainty even when terrified. One condition. Kate's voice was steady now. Nobody knows I'm the supervisor. Not until we see if this actually works. I can't let Emma find out her mom is trying to be a scientist again and then watch me fail. I can't put her through hoping for something better and then having it taken away. Morrison's grip tightened. Deal. He released her hand and adjusted his jacket. Became the CEO again. The vulnerable man who'd admitted he couldn't solve problems alone disappeared behind the armor of professional competence. But Ms. Williams... Morrison paused at the doorway. Yes? Stop calling yourself just anything. You just gave this company a chance to survive. That makes you anything but just. He walked out. Rachel followed after giving Kate a look she couldn't quite read. Something between respect and curiosity, and maybe a little bit of hope. Kate stood alone in the conference room. Her reflection in the whiteboard showed a 52-year-old woman in a gray uniform. But her hands were steady. Her mind was moving faster than it had in years. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and the doubt and the weight of knowing Emma's entire future was riding on decisions she made tonight,
was something that felt dangerously like hope. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Kowalski, the 72-year-old widow who lived next door and sometimes watched Emma when emergencies arose. "Everything okay? Thought I heard you leave again. Need me to check on the little one?" Kate typed back quickly. "Everything's fine. Might be a long night at work. Can you be on standby in case?" The response came immediately. "Of course, dear. She's lucky to have you. Whatever it is, I hope it's good news." Kate pocketed her phone and looked at the whiteboard one more time, at the corrections she'd made, at the proof that over a decade hadn't erased who she was, just forced her to become someone else for a while. She pulled out her phone again, called Mrs. Kowalski even though it was almost 1 in the morning. "Patricia, I need a favor."
A big one. Margaret Kowalski answered on the second ring. Despite the hour, her voice was immediately alert with the sharpness of someone who'd raised 4 children and buried a husband and learned that late-night calls rarely brought good news.
"Kate, is everything okay? Is Emma?"
"She's fine. She's sleeping."
Kate gripped the phone tighter than necessary. "But I need to stay at work tonight. Something came up. Something important." The pause lasted 3 heartbeats. In 3 years living next door, Kate had never once asked Patricia to watch Emma overnight. She was always home by 7 a.m. Always. The kind of reliability that made Patricia tell her book club Kate was the best mother she'd ever seen, even if she did look exhausted every single day. "This is about more than cleaning floors, isn't it?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." Her reflection in the conference room glass looked like a stranger, someone who might matter again.
Someone who might fail spectacularly and take her daughter's stability down with her.
"Go. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Emma won't even know you're gone. Patricia." The line went quiet except for the sound of her moving around. Then her voice came back, firm as bedrock. "I raised 4 children and buried a husband who worked himself to death trying to provide for us. I know what sacrifice looks like, Kate. And I know what it looks like when someone gets a chance that doesn't come twice. Whatever this is, don't let it pass you by because you're scared. Some doors only open once." Kate ended the call and stood motionless in the empty conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see Morrison speaking quietly with Rachel near the elevators. Both of them looked at her periodically, like she was a puzzle they were trying to solve, or a bomb they were deciding whether to defuse. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "I'm walking over now."
Left a note on Emma's nightstand in case she wakes up. It says, "Mommy is helping someone important tonight. She loves you to the moon and back. See you at breakfast. She'll be fine. Now go do whatever you need to do." Kate typed back with shaking fingers. "Thank you. I don't know how to—" The response came before she could finish. "You'd do the same for anyone. That's who you are. Now stop texting me and go be brilliant." Morrison appeared in the doorway. He carried 2 cups of coffee in paper cups that looked expensive, even empty, set one in front of Kate without ceremony. "It's terrible." His voice carried the dry humor of someone too exhausted for pretense. "But it's caffeine. The executive machine costs more per cup than most people spend on lunch, and it still tastes like regret." Kate almost smiled. "I've had worse." "I doubt that." Morrison sat across from her. The CEO armor had cracked slightly. Exhaustion showed through the gaps. "This coffee is a metaphor for everything wrong with this company. Expensive, overpromised, fundamentally disappointing." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just 2 people sitting in a conference room at 1 in the morning, drinking terrible coffee and trying to figure out how they'd ended up here.
Two strangers from opposite ends of every spectrum that mattered, connected by desperation and the slim chance that desperation might be enough. Tell me about the system. Kate set down her cup. Everything from the beginning. Morrison pulled up the main architecture on the central screen. Lines of code filled the display. Neural network diagrams, decision tree mappings, the kind of complex AI framework that defense contractors paid fortunes to develop and militaries paid even larger fortunes to deploy. We promised the Department of Defense an AI that could optimize military logistics in real time. Troop movements, supply chains, resource allocation, all coordinated by a single neural network that learns and adapts faster than any human team could manage. And it's failing. Kate could see the problem already. The architecture was brilliant but fundamentally flawed, like a bridge designed by engineers who'd never seen a river flood. Error rates climbing. The system can't adapt to unexpected variables. Every time we think we've fixed one problem, 3 more appear. Morrison's hands clenched around his coffee cup. We have until Thursday at 10 a.m., 34 hours from now. If we can't demonstrate a working system to General Harding, the contract goes to Meridian, and this company goes under. Kate studied the screen. Her mind was already racing through possibilities, making connections, seeing patterns. The caffeine hit her bloodstream and suddenly she felt more awake than she had in years. "Show me the decision tree." Morrison pulled it up. Kate leaned forward. The problem was right there. Obvious once you knew where to look, but you had to know where to look. And these engineers had been trained to see problems one way, while life had taught Kate to see them differently. "There," she pointed. "And there. Your engineers built this like a chess program. Every move calculated 17 steps ahead. Perfect logic, perfect precision. That's what we hired them for. That's why it's failing." Kate grabbed a marker from the table, stood up, moved to the whiteboard. Her hand was steady now, steadier than it had been in years. War isn't chess. Life isn't chess. You can't calculate 17 moves ahead when the board keeps changing, when pieces appear and disappear without warning, when the rules themselves shift mid-game. "So what do you suggest?" Morrison watched her with the intensity of someone who'd built his career on reading people and knowing when to bet on them. Kate started writing. The marker moved across the whiteboard with a certainty that surprised her. Muscle memory kicking in. Years of knowledge that had never actually gone away, just been buried under the need to survive. "My husband was a mechanical engineer." Her voice came out rougher than intended. "He spent his entire career designing systems that had to work in unpredictable conditions. Cars that had to handle ice and rain and drivers who panicked. Machines that had to keep running when everything went wrong." Morrison didn't interrupt, just watched her work. "I asked him once how he designed for chaos. You know what he said?" "What?" Kate stepped back from the whiteboard. She'd drawn a new architecture. Organic, adaptive, nothing like the rigid structure on the screens. He said you don't try to control chaos. You learn to dance with it. You build systems that are flexible, not rigid. You create frameworks that can bend without breaking. Morrison stared at the whiteboard. His expression was unreadable. But Kate had learned to read people too, in her own way. Learned it from years of being unnoticed and watching how people moved when they thought no one was paying attention. That's a completely different approach. This would require rebuilding the core architecture from scratch. "Yes, we have 34 hours. Then we'd better get started." Kate set down the marker, looked at Morrison with something that might have been confidence, or might have been the desperate bluff of a woman with nothing left to lose. Morrison stood, walked to the whiteboard, studied her work with the focus of someone who'd spent 40 years evaluating risks
and making bets that could destroy or save everything. "Why are you helping me?" His voice was quiet now. "You don't owe me anything. You don't owe this company anything. If anything, companies like mine are the reason people like you get overlooked in the first place." Kate thought about Emma, about Michael's hospital bed, and the promise she'd made while holding his hand. About over a decade of being unnoticed, and one night of someone finally asking her to be seen. When Michael was dying, he made me promise something. She could still feel his grip, weak but determined. He knew I'd have to give up MIT. He knew I'd spend years just surviving. But he made me promise that when the chance came, really came, I wouldn't let fear stop me from taking it. Her voice cracked slightly. He grabbed my hand and said, "Katie, you're going to want to hide. You're going to tell yourself you're not good enough anymore, that too much time has passed, that the world moved on without you." And he made me promise I wouldn't believe that. Morrison's eyes were bright, not crying, but close. "I've been waiting since Michael died for a door to open." Kate continued. "Tonight it did. And I made a promise to a man who deserved better than watching his wife become unnoticed for the rest of her life." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibilities Kate hadn't allowed herself to imagine in over a decade. Morrison's phone lit up on the table, Blake's name flashing across the screen. He declined the call without looking away from her. "We should get the team." Morrison's voice carried new urgency. "Rachel and a few others I trust. People who can actually help rebuild this before Thursday morning." Kate's stomach dropped. More people meant more risk. More chances for someone to ask questions she couldn't answer without exposing everything she'd hidden since Michael died. How many people? Her hands found the edge of the table, steadying herself. 3. Maybe 4. Morrison was already texting. "They're good. They won't ask questions they don't need answers to." Within 20 minutes, the conference room filled with voices. Rachel returned first, now in jeans and a Nexus hoodie, laptop already open. Behind her came Dr. Helen Thompson, 58 years old, with steel gray hair pulled into a practical bun and eyes that had seen 3 decades of tech industry nonsense. Last through the door was Maya Brooks, 29 and crackling with the kind of energy that should have been impossible at 2 in the morning. Purple highlights streaked through her dark hair, MIT class ring catching the fluorescent light. "Everyone, this is Kate Williams." Morrison gestured toward her, and Kate felt the weight of their stares. "She's the reason we're not writing resignation letters tomorrow morning." Maya's eyes went to the whiteboard, scanning the equations with the speed of someone who lived and breathed this work. Her mouth fell open. "You fixed the neural network." Maya's voice carried disbelief and something that might have been awe. "I ran the corrections through 16 different simulations after Rachel sent me the photos. They work every single time. I've been studying AI for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone solve a temporal decay problem that fast." Helen stepped forward, extending her hand with the confidence of someone who'd earned the right to make judgment calls. Helen Thompson, senior architect, 30 years in this industry. She shook Kate's hand firmly, grip strong and practical. "I don't care where you went to school or what you've been doing for the past decade. I care about results, and based on what I'm seeing on that whiteboard, you've got results. Thank you." Kate felt something loosening in her chest. Acceptance, maybe. Or just the relief of not being immediately dismissed. "Don't thank me yet." Helen's eyes twinkled slightly. "You're about to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Bobby says you need to be home by 7 a.m. That gives us 5 hours to start rebuilding a system 20 engineers couldn't fix in 3 days.
Is that possible? Rachel looked between them. Only one way to find out. Kate moved back to the whiteboard, marker in hand. The next 5 hours blurred together in a way Kate had forgotten was possible. Her hands flew across keyboards that felt foreign and familiar at the same time. Muscle memory returning, brain patterns reactivating, like a language she'd once spoken fluently and thought she'd forgotten, but turned out to be just sleeping. Maya challenged her at 2:45. If we restructure the weighted nodes this way, won't we lose predictive accuracy in stable scenarios? Kate didn't hesitate. Yes, by about 8%. But we gain 400% adaptability in chaos scenarios. War isn't stable. We're optimizing for reality, not theory. Maya grinned, energy at this hour somehow infectious. I like how you think. Helen solved an integration problem at 4:20 that Kate had been stuck on for 40 minutes. She walked Kate through a neural architecture search framework that hadn't existed when Kate had been in school, showed her what was possible with modern tools. This is incredible. Kate absorbed the information like she'd been starving for it, which she had been. Years of intellectual drought ending in a single night of collaboration that felt like coming home. They spent 45 minutes exploring possibilities, equals, colleagues, not janitor and executive. Just two people who understood systems and loved the puzzle of making them work better. Rachel brought breakfast sandwiches at 5:30. None of them had noticed the sun starting to rise over Seattle's skyline, painting the conference room windows in shades of pink and gold. She set down coffee, better coffee than the executive machine produced, and food that actually smelled appealing. You all look like you haven't slept in days. Eat something before you collapse. Can't collapse yet. Maya was typing furiously. We're so close. The integration is almost... The screen flashed green. Every module connecting, every test passing. Maya let out a whoop that probably woke people on lower floors. It works. She spun her chair around to face the room. The core framework actually works. Morrison walked over from where he'd been making phone calls and managing some crisis with the board. He looked at the screen, face showing nothing, but Kate could see his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the back of Maya's chair. Run the full stress test. All scenarios. Military operations, supply chain disruptions, multivariable chaos. Everything. Maya's fingers flew. The system processed, calculated, adapted. Green metrics filled every screen, performance numbers that made Rachel whistle low under her breath. Error reduction 68%. Maya's voice cracked. That's better than this morning's test. Processing speed increase 47%. Adaptation to unexpected variables increase 320%. Helen leaned back in her chair, something like wonder crossing her weathered features. Well, I'll be damned. It actually works. Kate stared at the screens, at proof that she hadn't lost it. That the years since Michael died hadn't erased the person she'd been. That maybe, just maybe, she could give Emma something better than a mother who came home exhausted every morning smelling like cleaning chemicals. Her phone alarm went off. 6:45. 15 minutes to get home before Emma woke up, before her carefully constructed routine shattered and her daughter found out her mother had spent the night doing something that might fail spectacularly and break both their hearts. I have to go. Kate stood up fast enough to make her chair roll backward. Maya's head snapped around. But the system isn't finished. We still need to optimize that. My daughter's waking up. I promised I'd be there. Kate grabbed her jacket from where she'd draped it over a chair hours ago. Felt everyone's eyes on her. Morrison stood. Go. We'll continue without you. But Bobby, Kate started. I've spent 40 years choosing work over the people who matter. Morrison's voice was firm, but underneath it was something softer, something that understood. Don't make my mistakes. Go home. Be with Emma. Come back tonight.
Kate hesitated at the door. Part of her screaming that leaving now was abandoning them, that she needed to stay and finish what she'd started. But the larger part, the part that had kept her going through years of exhaustion, knew Emma needed her more than this system did. "Thank you." Her throat was tight. "For seeing me. For giving me a chance." Morrison smiled. First genuine smile she'd seen from him. "Thank you for reminding me what chances are for." Kate ran for the elevator. She had 15 minutes to get across town, change out of clothes that smelled like coffee and electronic equipment, and become mom again. The transition felt impossible, but she'd been doing impossible things since Michael died. This was just one more.
The cab driver looked at her funny when Kate gave an address and offered to pay double to get there in 12 minutes. Looked at her harder when she pulled out cash instead of a credit card. But money talked, and the driver made it happen. Kate burst through her apartment door at 6:57, stripped off her shirt while running to the bathroom, shoved everything under the sink where Emma wouldn't find it, splashed water on her face, pulled on jeans and a t-shirt. Her hands were still shaking from caffeine and adrenaline, and the surreal understanding that she'd just spent 6 hours doing work she'd loved more than anything except her family. "Mama?" Emma stood in the hallway, clutching the stuffed elephant Michael's mother had given her 3 days before dying. Her hair was a wild mess of sleep-tangled curls, brown eyes so much like her father's it hurt to look at them sometimes. Kate's heart cracked open the way it did every morning. "Hey, sweetheart, you're up early?"
"You look tired." Emma's voice carried concern beyond her years. "I'm okay. Just a long night." Kate knelt down so they were eye level. "How'd you sleep?" "Good. Mrs. Kowalski said you were helping someone important." Emma padded toward her on bare feet. "Was it the princess from your stories? The one who forgot how to smile?" Kate's brain stuttered. "What princess, honey?" "The one who built her castle too high and couldn't remember how to come down." Emma studied her face with uncomfortable perceptiveness. "Did you help her remember?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Something like that." Kate pulled her close, breathing in strawberry shampoo and the innocence of a child who still believed her mother could fix anything. "You'll do it." Emma spoke with absolute certainty. "You always help people. That's your superpower." "I don't have superpowers, Emma." Kate's voice came out rougher than intended. "Yes, you do. Your superpower is you never give up. Even when things are hard, even when you're tired, you just keep going." Kate held her tighter. Couldn't speak because her 8-year-old daughter had just described her better than she'd ever been able to describe herself. "Mama?" "Yeah?" "I'm hungry." Emma pulled back with the practical concern of a child whose stomach operated on a schedule. Kate laughed. Real laugh. First one in longer than she could remember. "Then let's make pancakes." They made pancakes together in the tiny kitchen that barely fit 2 people. Emma stood on her step stool, carefully measuring flour while Kate worked the griddle. She talked about her upcoming science project, about how Connor's dad had said something mean about people who clean offices at yesterday's school pickup, about how Mrs. Peterson, their neighbor, was writing a book and wanted to interview parents who work hard. Kate listened. She always listened. But today, something else churned beneath the surface. A question she'd been avoiding for years, because she was terrified of the answer. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Sure." She flipped a pancake with careful concentration. "If I had a chance to do something different, something bigger, but it might change things, would you be okay with that?" Emma set down the spatula, looked at her with an expression too old for her face. "What kind of different?" "I don't know yet. Maybe a different job, maybe working different hours for a while. Would you be okay if I wasn't always home right at 7? Would you still be home in the mornings? Emma's voice was small, vulnerable in a way that made Kate want to promise impossible things. I'd try. I'd always try. Kate crouched down beside the stove, met her eyes. But I need you to know something. Whatever changes, I love you more than anything, more than any job, more than anything. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke with the kind of wisdom that comes from watching adults try to hide their struggles. Mama, Connor said his dad makes lots of money and that's why he's important. But Mrs. Peterson said that's not how you measure people. She said you measure people by how they make others feel. Mrs. Peterson is very smart. Kate's vision blurred slightly. I know. So if this different thing makes you feel good, then you should do it. Because when you feel good, I feel good. That's how it works. When did you get so wise? Kate pulled her into a hug that lifted her off the step stool. I've been practicing. Emma giggled, breath smelling like maple syrup and childhood. They finished making pancakes, ate them together while Emma chattered about her upcoming field trip to the Science Museum and how she hoped they'd see the dinosaur bones because dinosaurs were the coolest thing ever, except maybe space. Kate walked her to the bus stop at 8:15, watched her climb aboard with her too heavy backpack and her lunchbox covered in stickers, waved until the bus disappeared around the corner, then stood alone on the sidewalk feeling the weight of everything pressing down. Her phone buzzed. Morrison. General Harding moved up the demonstration, Thursday morning at 10 a.m. instead of Friday afternoon. Can you come in early tonight? We have 20 hours instead of 60. Kate's stomach dropped. 20 hours. Less than a day. Her fingers felt numb typing the response. I'll be there. The day crawled by in a surreal haze. Kate tried to sleep, but her brain wouldn't shut off. Kept running through algorithms, seeing problems, finding solutions. She'd spent years teaching her mind to be quiet, and now it refused to cooperate. At 2 p.m., she gave up on sleep, called Patricia to check if she could watch Emma again tonight. Made it through the conversation without revealing how much was riding on the next 24 hours. How everything, Emma's stability, their future, her last chance to prove she wasn't a washed-up failure, depended on a system working that had destroyed 20 PhDs. She arrived at Nexus Technologies at 8 p.m., couldn't stay away. The executive floor was buzzing with activity. Maya hunched over her laptop with headphones on. Helen in deep conversation with Rachel over a tablet showing code architecture. Morrison pacing near the windows like a caged predator. You're early. Morrison's voice held surprise. Couldn't sleep. Kate set down her backpack. How bad is it? We're close. Maya pulled off her headphones. The integration works, but we need to optimize response times. The system is adapting, but not fast enough for real-time military applications. Show me. Kate moved to her workstation, fell into the rhythm like she'd never left. Like the years since Michael died were nothing, like she belonged here. They worked through the night. Kate's hands flew across keyboards. Her voice grew stronger as she explained concepts to Maya and Helen, teaching them the frameworks she'd developed in her own mind during years of theoretical work with no equipment except her imagination. At 10:30, Helen taught her a new optimization technique. At 12:45, Maya showed her an integration pattern she'd never seen. They built on each other, learned from each other, the kind of collaboration Kate had dreamed about in graduate school and thought she'd never experience. At 2:30 a.m., the integration test failed catastrophically. Error cascades across the entire system. Maya looked close to tears. Helen swore under her breath. Rachel stopped mid-phone call to stare at the red screens. Kate stayed calm, the way she'd learned to stay calm when Michael was dying in that ICU and Emma was kicking inside her at 6 months and the doctors were saying there was nothing more they could do. The way she'd learned to stay calm when choosing between buying groceries or paying the electric bill. The way survival had taught her. Pull up the no distribution matrix. Her voice was steady. Helen did. Kate stared at it for 90 seconds, then pointed. There. Subsection 47. We're overweighting temporal data in chaos scenarios. The system's trying too hard to learn from randomness. She walked them through the fix. 12 minutes of recalibration. Helen and Maya working together while Kate watched and corrected and guided. The test ran again. Green across every metric. Rachel actually cheered. Maya hugged Helen. Morrison stopped pacing long enough to close his eyes and take a breath that looked like it hurt. Kate felt nothing for a moment, then everything all at once. Relief and terror, and the crushing awareness that this was real. That she might actually pull this off. That she might actually matter again. Her phone buzzed. 9:23 p.m. Unknown number. This is Dr. Brennan. I've reviewed security footage and consulted with the board. I know what you are and what you've been doing. Thomas Blake and I are calling an emergency board meeting Thursday morning at 9 a.m. You and Morrison are both finished. The world tilted sideways. Kate read the message 3 times. Each time the words stayed the same, sharp and final. Morrison appeared beside her. His phone buzzed at the same moment. He read his screen, face going completely expressionless, the kind of blank that comes from years of controlling reactions. Brennan knows. Her voice was flat. He's going to the board. Morrison checked the time. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. 1 hour before we're supposed to demonstrate the system to General Harding. Kate already knew what this meant, already understood how Blake would use the timing. Morrison pocketed his phone. Blake will push for termination, both of us. He's been waiting for an excuse to take this company. The room had gone quiet. Maya and Helen and Rachel all staring, all understanding what this meant. I'm sorry. Kate felt sick. This is my fault. I shouldn't have touched that whiteboard. I should have stayed unnoticed. Don't. Morrison's voice cut like a blade. Don't you dare apologize for being brilliant. Don't you dare apologize for saving this company. I didn't save it. I made it worse. Kate gestured at her phone, at proof that trying to matter again had destroyed everything. Now you'll lose everything because you took a chance on me. You made it real. Morrison met her eyes. For the first time in 20 years, this company did something courageous, something that mattered more than protocols and credentials and playing it safe. Whatever happens tomorrow, that means something.
What do we do?
Rachel's voice was small. We finished the system. Morrison straightened, became the CEO again. We prepare for the demonstration, and at 9 a.m. tomorrow, we walk into that boardroom and show them what we've built. And if the board doesn't listen? Maya looked scared. Young and scared, and like she was just realizing the adults didn't actually have everything under control. Then we go down swinging. Morrison's eyes found Kate's. Together. Kate thought about Emma, about Michael's promise, about years of being unnoticed and one night of finally being seen, about how stupid she'd been to think she could have this, to think she deserved a second chance. Together. The word came out steadier than she felt. They worked through dawn. Kate's exhaustion had moved past tired into some crystalline state where everything felt sharp and immediate. The code flowed. The architecture held. By 7 a.m. Wednesday, they had something that looked like it might actually work. Kate's alarm went off.
Time to go home to Emma. Time to pretend everything was normal while her world balanced on a knife edge. Go. Morrison's voice was gentle. Be with her. Come back at 7 tonight. We'll keep optimizing. Kate gathered her things, looked at the screens one more time. At proof she could still do this work. At evidence that might disappear in less than 24 hours when Blake convinced the board she was a security risk and Morrison was a liability. She took the bus home instead of a cab, needing the time to decompress, to shift from Kate the scientist back to Kate the mom. The Seattle morning was gray and drizzling, matching her mood. Emma was already awake when Kate got home, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal Mrs. Kowalski had made for her. "Mama!" Emma jumped up, spilling milk. "You're late!" Kate checked her watch. 7:05. 5 minutes late, and Emma had noticed. The routine she'd built so carefully was already starting to crack. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Work ran a little long." Kate hugged her, felt Emma's small body tense slightly. "Mrs. Kowalski says you're doing something important at work now, not just cleaning." Emma pulled back, studying her face. "Is that true?" Kate knelt down, eye level. "Yeah, honey, it's true. They asked me to help with a special project." "But you're still coming home in the mornings?" The vulnerability in Emma's voice nearly broke her. "Every morning I can, I promise." Kate touched her cheek. "You're the most important thing in my life. More important than any project." Emma nodded, but something in her eyes said she was old enough now to know that promises and reality didn't always match. Kate spent the morning with Emma, trying to be present while her mind raced through what would happen in less than 24 hours. The board meeting at 9, the demonstration at 10, Blake's accusations, Brennan's evidence, the security footage showing her accessing classified work without clearance. At noon, Emma asked the question Kate had been dreading. "Mama, if this project is really important, does that mean you might have to work more? Like, not be home as much?" Kate sat down on Emma's bed, patted the space beside her. Emma climbed up, stuffed elephant clutched tight. "I don't know yet, honey." Kate chose her words carefully. "The project might not work out. The people I'm working with might decide I'm not the right person for it. But you're smart." Emma's faith was absolute. "You can do anything. Being smart isn't always enough." Kate felt the weight of years pressing down. Sometimes people care more about paperwork than about what you can actually do. "That's stupid." Emma's indignation was fierce. Kate laughed despite everything. "Yeah, sweetheart. It kind of is." She tried to sleep that afternoon but kept seeing Blake's face, kept hearing Brennan's voice, kept imagining the board voting to fire Morrison and ban her from the building. Kept thinking about Emma's college fund that didn't exist, about the field trip she couldn't afford, about going back to being unnoticed. At 6 p.m., she kissed Emma goodbye, promised Mrs. Kowalski she'd be back by morning, and headed to Nexus for what might be the last time. The executive floor felt different, tense. Morrison was in his office on a call that involved a lot of pacing. Rachel looked like she'd been crying. Maya and Helen were running simulations with grim determination. "Kate." Rachel pulled her aside as soon as she arrived. "Blake's been calling board members all day. He's got 6 votes guaranteed. Morrison needs 7 to survive. How many does he have?" Kate already knew the answer. 5, maybe 6 if we're lucky. Rachel's voice dropped. "Blake's painting you as a security risk, says you could be selling secrets to pay off your debt." "Am I?" Kate heard how defeated she sounded. "A security risk?" Rachel grabbed her shoulders. "You're a brilliant woman who got a raw deal and kept fighting anyway. That's not a security risk.
That's someone who refuses to give up, and that's exactly who we need. Morrison emerged from his office, saw Kate, managed a tired smile. Ready for round 2? His attempt at humor fell flat. Ready as I'll ever be. Kate moved to her workstation, but her hands were shaking now. The confidence from last night had evaporated in the harsh light of consequences. They worked through the evening, but the energy was different. Anxious. Each optimization felt like it might be their last. Each successful test felt like a small victory before an inevitable defeat. At midnight, Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened, went pale. That was Jennifer. My daughter. Morrison's voice was hollow. Mia's been in an accident.
Car hit her bike near their house. She's at Seattle Children's Hospital. The room froze. Go. Kate heard herself say it before thinking. Go now. The demo is in 10 hours. The board meeting. Morrison looked lost. Is meaningless if you lose your granddaughter while saving a company. Kate moved toward him, steady even though she felt like she was falling apart. I know what it's like to lose someone you love. To have that moment when everything else stops mattering. Don't waste that moment on this. Morrison stared at her. The system is ready. We can present it without you. Kate's voice grew stronger. Emma taught me something. She said you measure people by how they make others feel, not by how much money they make. Your granddaughter needs to feel like you chose her. Just once. Morrison grabbed his coat, stopped at the door. Kate. His voice cracked. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. For believing I could still matter. He left. The door closed. Kate turned back to find Maya, Helen, and Rachel all looking at her. Well, Rachel's voice was steady. I guess we're doing this without him. The next 7 hours were the longest of Kate's life. They refined every parameter, tested every scenario, prepared for every question General Harding might ask. But underneath it all, Kate couldn't stop thinking about Morrison sitting in a hospital waiting room, about Mia, hurt and scared, about the choice he'd made to finally put family first, about whether she was making the same choice, or the opposite one. At 6 a.m., Kate's alarm went off. Time to go home to Emma. But the board meeting was in 3 hours, the demonstration in 4. Go. Maya looked up from her screen. We've got this. Emma needs you more than we do right now. Kate hesitated. Everything in her screaming that she couldn't leave now, not when they were so close. Her phone buzzed. Emma. Mama, Mrs. Kowalski says you might not be home this morning.
Are you okay? Kate's throat closed. She looked at the screens, at the system they'd built, at proof she could still do this work. Then she looked at Emma's text, at proof someone loved her unconditionally, whether she was a scientist or a janitor or anything in between. For years, since Michael died, Kate had never missed a 7 a.m. breakfast. Never. Emma's routine had been sacred, unbreakable. Until now. Kate looked at Emma's text one more time. The guilt settled in her chest like concrete. But the alternative, walking away from the board meeting, letting Morrison face Blake alone, watching everything they'd built collapse, felt worse. I'm okay, sweetheart. Just working on something important. I'll be home soon, I promise. She hit send. The lie tasted like ash. Maya's face was understanding. We've all got people we're letting down tonight. At least you're doing it for the right reasons. Kate wasn't sure there were right reasons for disappointing your child, but she stayed anyway, watching the sky lighten over Seattle, watching the minutes tick down to 9 a.m.,
watching her carefully constructed life fracture along fault lines she'd spent years trying to seal. Sometimes being a mother meant teaching your daughter that some fights were worth the cost, even if the cost was a missed breakfast, even if the cost was breaking a promise you'd kept for over a decade. Kate just hoped Emma would understand. Someday. At 8:45, Rachel's phone rang. Morrison. He's at the hospital. Mia's stable, but he's staying with her. Rachel looked at Kate. He says to do the board meeting without him. Says to tell the truth and let the chips fall. Kate felt ice in her stomach. She was about to walk into a boardroom full of people who thought she was a criminal, who thought Morrison had lost his mind, who had every reason to fire them both and move on. And she was going to do it alone. Ready? Helen appeared at her shoulder, steady as bedrock. No, Kate's voice shook. But I'm doing it anyway. That's all courage is. Helen squeezed her arm. Doing the thing that terrifies you because the alternative is worse. They walked toward the boardroom together. Kate in clothes she'd borrowed from Rachel because her janitor uniform was all she owned. Maya and Helen flanking her like bodyguards, Rachel bringing up the rear with a tablet full of data. The door loomed ahead. Behind it, 12 board members and General Harding and Colonel Martinez and Dr. Brennan, all waiting to judge whether a woman who cleaned toilets had any right to call herself a scientist. Kate thought about Michael dying in that ICU, about Emma trusting her to always come home, about Morrison choosing his granddaughter over his company, about years of being unnoticed and one chance to prove she'd never stopped mattering. She pushed open the door. 12 faces turned toward Kate as she entered the boardroom. The silence felt surgical, precise, designed to cut. Thomas Blake sat at the head of the table, already claiming territory that wasn't his. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit that probably cost more than Kate made in 6 months as a supervisor. The kind of man who'd spent his life accumulating power and knew exactly how to wield it. Dr. Brennan occupied the seat to Blake's right, satisfaction radiating from him like heat. 23 years of credentials and published papers and professional respect, all threatened by someone who mopped floors. But something else flickered in his eyes too. Fear. The kind of fear that comes from watching younger researchers publish faster, from feeling the ground shift beneath decades of certainty, from knowing that relevance is temporary and easily lost. And at the far end of the table, unexpected and completely unannounced, sat General William Harding in full dress uniform. 60 years old, ramrod posture, eyes that had seen combat and death, and knew how to calculate the cost of failure in human lives instead of dollars. Kate's feet stopped moving. Harding wasn't supposed to be here. The demonstration was scheduled for 10 a.m. It was only 9. Someone had changed the timeline again, turned this into an ambush. General Harding. Rachel recovered first, voice steady despite the surprise. We weren't expecting you until... I moved my schedule. Harding's voice cut through the room like a blade through tissue. Mr. Blake was kind enough to inform me there might be irregularities with this project. I wanted to see for myself. Blake stood, spreading his hands in a gesture of false humility that made Kate's stomach turn. General, I apologize that you had to learn about this situation in such an unfortunate manner. If I'd known earlier about Mr. Morrison's lapse in judgment, what lapse would that be, Mr.
Blake? Harding's expression remained neutral, but something dangerous flickered beneath.
Blake picked up a folder from the table, opened it with theatrical precision. Mr. Morrison hired an unqualified individual to work on your contract. A woman with no security clearance, no credentials, no background in artificial intelligence research. I see.
Harding's gaze shifted to Kate, predator assessing prey. And who is this unqualified individual? Kate stepped forward before Rachel could speak, before she could talk herself out of it. That would be me, sir. Kate Williams. And for what it's worth, everything Mr. Blake just said is true. The room went silent. One of the board members actually gasped. Another exchanged glances with her neighbor. Brennan's smile widened. What are your qualifications, Ms. Williams? Harding's tone gave nothing away. I was 2 semesters away from a PhD at MIT before I dropped out over a decade ago. Kate heard her voice from very far away.
Since then, I've been working as night shift supervisor at this company, managing the cleaning crew. A janitor. Harding's voice carried no judgment, just statement of fact. You're telling me a janitor has been working on a classified defense contract? Yes, sir. Kate forced herself to stand straighter, to not shrink, to remember that Michael had made her promise she wouldn't make herself small. Blake jumped in, voice dripping false concern. You see, General, this is exactly what I was warning you about. Mr. Morrison's judgment has been compromised. He's been making emotional decisions instead of— I didn't ask you, Mr. Blake. Harding didn't even look at him, attention staying locked on Kate. Ms. Williams, I want you to explain to me in plain English what you did to this system. Kate's throat went dry. Every instinct screamed at her to defer, to let someone more qualified speak, to become unnoticed again because being seen meant being vulnerable to judgment. But then she thought about Emma asking if the important project would make her feel good. About Morrison choosing Mia over the company. About the years since Michael died, and one chance to prove it hadn't destroyed who she was. Sir, your engineers built a perfect system. Every protocol followed, every parameter optimized, every calculation exact. Kate heard her voice growing stronger. And that's the problem. Harding leaned forward slightly. Explain. It's a problem because war isn't perfect. Life isn't perfect. Your system was designed to predict the future based on past patterns, but the future doesn't follow patterns. It breaks them. Blake scoffed. General, this is exactly the kind of unscientific— Mr. Blake. Harding's voice dropped to a tone that could freeze blood. One more interruption and you'll wait outside. Blake's face reddened. He sat down hard, jaw clenched. Kate continued, gaining momentum now. I redesigned the core architecture to adapt instead of predict. To learn from chaos instead of trying to control it. To think like a field commander instead of a computer. Those are nice words, Ms. Williams. Harding's expression remained unreadable. Can you prove them? Yes, sir. Kate looked at Maya, who was already setting up the presentation screen with her laptop. General, if you'll allow us to demonstrate— Not you, Ms. Williams. Harding held up one hand. Him. He pointed at Brennan. I want to see the system from someone who actually built it. Someone with credentials. Kate's stomach dropped. Brennan looked like Christmas had come early. This was exactly what he'd wanted. A chance to prove Kate's work was smoke and mirrors, that Morrison had been played by a clever janitor with delusions of competence. Maya started to protest, but Rachel touched her arm, shook her head slightly. They had no choice. This was Harding's show now. Brennan stood, moved to the presentation screen with the confidence of someone who knew he was about to win. General, I'll be happy to demonstrate the current state of the system, though I should note that the modifications Ms. Williams made are highly experimental and haven't been properly vetted through our standard— Just run the demonstration, Doctor. Harding's patience was wearing thin. Brennan pulled up the system architecture. Kate's modifications were visible in the code, marked in a different color from the original framework.
He selected a standard logistics scenario, supply chain optimization across 3 bases with normal operational parameters. The system processed smoothly, green metrics across the board. Brennan smiled. As you can see, General, the basic functionality works well within expected parameters. Run it with chaos variables. Kate heard herself speak before thinking. Run it with the kind of scenario that actually breaks in the real world. Brennan turned to her, condescension dripping from every word. Mrs. Williams, I don't think you understand how military demonstrations work. We show baseline functionality first, then run the Kandahar scenario. Kate's voice carried across the room, southern drawl thickening with stress. 2023, supply line mission that took 3 weeks and killed 11 soldiers. Harding's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He knew this mission, had probably signed the casualty reports, maybe attended some of those funerals. Blake started to object, but Harding spoke first. Run it. Brennan's confidence flickered. He input the parameters, fingers moving slower now. The system processed for 8 seconds, then displayed a result. The old system, the one before Kate's modifications, showed multiple viable routes, all ranked by efficiency and risk. Standard military logistics output. Now run it with Ms. Williams's architecture enabled. Harding wasn't asking. Brennan switched to Kate's modified framework. Input the same scenario. The system processed for 3 seconds. 3 alternative routes appeared, but they were different, fundamentally different. Not just ranked by efficiency, but by adaptive risk assessment that accounted for real-time terrain analysis, probabilistic IED placement, weather pattern impacts on visibility and equipment function. Route Alpha bypasses the main conflict zone entirely by rerouting through the northern corridor. Kate stepped forward, couldn't help herself. Estimated delivery time 14 hours, casualty risk minimal. The northern corridor was mined. Harding's voice was flat, statement of fact, not question. The system accounts for that. Look here. Kate pulled up the detailed analysis. It detected anomalies in the terrain data, flagged potential IED placement based on historical patterns and geographic choke points, suggested reconnaissance drone sweep before convoy movement. Nobody in the original mission thought of that. Harding's words hung in the air. Nobody in the original mission could process that much data fast enough. Kate met the general's eyes, steady now. The system did it in 3 seconds. The room was absolutely silent. Board members staring at the screen. Blake's expression shifting from triumph to uncertainty. Brennan looking like he'd been punched in the stomach. Harding stood slowly, walked toward the screen with the measured pace of someone whose decisions determined whether soldiers came home alive. Run another scenario, something your team hasn't prepared for. Blake tried one more time. General, surely that's not necessary. The point has been made about protocol violations. The point, Mr. Blake, is whether this system can save American lives. Harding's words could have cut steel. I don't care who built it. I care if it works. He turned back to Kate. Hurricane evacuation, Gulf Coast. 3 military bases, 12,000 personnel, limited air transport, deteriorating weather window. You have 30 seconds to input the scenario. Kate's fingers flew across the keyboard. No time to think, no time to doubt. Just muscle memory and instinct, and the desperation of a woman who had everything riding on the next 90 seconds. The system processed, calculated, displayed results. Primary evacuation route uses naval vessels from Pensacola coordinated with commercial shipping lanes. Kate explained rapidly. Secondary route coordinates helicopter transport in rotation to minimize weather exposure. Tertiary route establishes temporary shelters at inland facilities if transport becomes impossible. Time frame? Harding's voice was sharp. All 12,000 personnel evacuated within 18 hours. Kate pulled up the detailed logistics. The system accounts for real-time weather data, equipment availability, personnel readiness across all 3 bases. Standard military protocol takes 36 hours for that evacuation. Harding's eyebrows rose fractionally. The first break in his professional mask. Standard protocol doesn't account for real-time weather adaptation. Kate felt something clicking into place, a certainty that had nothing to do with confidence and everything to do with knowing she was right. This system does. Harding turned to face the board, expression revealing nothing. Blake started to stand, started to speak. "Mr. Blake, you called me here to report irregularities with this project." Harding's voice carried the authority of 4 decades commanding soldiers, the weight of sending people to die and living with those decisions. "Yes, General. The protocol violations alone. I've commanded soldiers for 40 years. Harding spoke slowly, each word precisely placed. "You know what kills soldiers, Mr. Blake? It's not protocol violations. It's rigid thinking. It's systems that can't adapt. It's leaders who care more about rules than results." Blake's face went pale. "General, I was only trying to protect..." "You were trying to protect your position." Harding's voice never rose. Didn't need to. "There's a difference." He walked toward Kate, stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the ribbons on his uniform, the years of service, the weight of responsibility. "Ms. Williams, why did you drop out of MIT?" The question came quiet, almost gentle. Kate felt the ground shifting under her feet. "My husband was killed in a car accident, sir." Kate's voice cracked slightly. "We had a 6-month-old daughter, no insurance, mountains of medical debt and funeral expenses." "Did he survive?" Harding's eyes searched Kate's face. "No, sir. He died in the ICU 3 days after the crash." "So you've been raising your daughter alone ever since?" Not a question. Harding had clearly read whatever background check someone had run. "Yes, sir." Kate swallowed hard. "Working night shift as a janitor, as a supervisor, so I could be home when she wakes up in the mornings." The silence stretched. Brennan shifted in his seat. Blake stared at the table. The board members watched like they were witnessing something significant but weren't sure what. "Why didn't you go back?" Harding's voice remained steady. "Finish your degree." Kate felt the answer lodge in her throat, the truth she'd been avoiding since Michael died. By the time I could breathe again, it felt too late. Because I'd spent so long being unnoticed that I forgot I could be anything else. She forced the rest out. "Because I was afraid, sir. Afraid I wasn't good enough anymore. Afraid I'd fail. Afraid my daughter would watch me fail." The silence was absolute. Blake looked uncomfortable. Brennan wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Even the board members seemed to realize they were witnessing something that transcended corporate politics. Harding extended his hand. "Miss Williams, I've commanded thousands of soldiers." Harding's grip was firm, steady. The best ones, the ones who saved lives, who won battles, who made a difference. They weren't the ones with the best training or the fanciest degrees. Kate shook his hand, too stunned to process what was happening. They were the ones who'd been broken and put themselves back together. Harding's voice carried the weight of experience. The ones who knew what it meant to lose everything and kept fighting anyway. The ones who'd experienced chaos and learned to think inside it instead of trying to control it from outside. He didn't release Kate's hand, just held it while speaking with absolute certainty. "You're not unqualified, Ms. Williams. You're exactly qualified because you built a system that thinks the way survivors think, the way people who've lost everything think, the way soldiers think when the plan falls apart and all you have is your judgment and your guts. Harding turned to the board. I'm approving the contract. Full funding. The board members started to relax, started to smile. Blake opened his mouth. And I'm adding a condition. Harding's voice stopped all movement, all breath. Rachel stepped forward. What condition, General? Ms. Williams leads the implementation team. Harding spoke with finality. Provisional security clearance for the demonstration is already granted. Full clearance and compensation will follow standard DoD protocols. Her title will be Lead Systems Architect, reporting directly to Mr. Morrison when he returns. Blake shot to his feet. General, you can't be serious. The board has final say on personnel decisions. Then the board can find another $100 million contract. Harding's voice became steel wrapped in courtesy. This system saves lives. Miss Williams built it. Either she leads it, or I walk. And I'll make sure every branch of the military knows why. The room erupted. Board members shouting, Blake arguing, Brennan trying desperately to salvage something from the wreckage of his plans. Through it all, Kate stood frozen. This wasn't happening. Couldn't be happening. People like her didn't get chances like this. Rachel appeared beside her, hand touching her arm just for a moment. Breathe. Rachel's voice was quiet beneath the chaos. You did it. I didn't do anything. Kate felt disconnected from her body. You showed up. You told the truth. You let them see who you really are. Rachel's eyes were bright. That's the hardest thing anyone can do. The shouting died down. One by one, the board members fell silent. The chairwoman, an older woman Kate had barely noticed before, stood with the authority of someone who'd learned when to let chaos run and when to impose order. We'll vote. Her voice cut through the remaining noise. All in favor of accepting General Harding's terms, including the appointment of Kate Williams as lead systems architect. Hands went up.
Kate counted through a fog. 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9. All opposed. Blake's hand. Brennan's ally. 2 other board members who looked torn but committed. Motion carries 9-4. The chairwoman's voice was final. Congratulations, Ms. Williams. Welcome to Nexus Technologies. Officially this time. Blake stood, but before he could storm out, something shifted in his face. He looked at Kate, really looked at her, and for just a moment the corporate shock facade cracked. For what it's worth. Blake's voice was quiet, almost lost in the shuffle of people standing. My daughter dropped out of college when my grandson was born. Hasn't been back. Every time I see her working retail, barely making rent, I wonder if I should have. His jaw tightened. I was wrong about you, Miss Williams. But I wasn't wrong that the board needs to be careful. I just picked the wrong hill to die on. He walked out, not storming, just walking.
A man who'd lost, but maybe learned something in the process. Brennan followed, defeated and silent. The remaining board members approached to shake Kate's hand, to welcome her, to pretend they hadn't just watched her almost get destroyed. Harding approached one final time, the rest of the board giving him space. Ms. Williams, I meant what I said. Harding's voice was quieter now, more human. The best leaders I've known weren't the ones who never fell. They were the ones who got back up. He paused. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, sir. Kate's voice came out rough. Harding nodded,
something like understanding in his eyes. I can tell. That's why you'll be good at this job. Because you know what matters. He turned to leave. Kate called after him. Sir? Harding looked back. Thank you. For seeing me. Kate felt the words inadequate but couldn't find better ones. Harding smiled, transformation that made him look 10 years younger.
I've spent 40 years learning that the most important people are usually the ones nobody's looking at. You reminded me why that matters. He left. The board members followed. Rachel and Maya were hugging. Helen had tears in her eyes, steady woman finally allowing herself to feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. You should go. Rachel appeared beside Kate, voice gentle. Emma's at school. She deserves to hear this from you. Kate looked at the clock. 9:47. Emma would be in third period. Reading, probably. She loved reading almost as much as math. I don't know how to tell her. Kate heard the fear in her own voice. What if she's disappointed? What if she thinks less of me for hiding it all these years? Rachel's hand squeezed her shoulder. Kate, that little girl thinks you hung the moon. Nothing you tell her is going to change that. But she deserves to know the woman she already loves is even more extraordinary than she imagined. Kate's throat closed. Couldn't speak. Just nodded. Maya was already calling a cab. It pulled up by the time Kate reached the street, driver asking if she was okay. Kate realized she was crying. Didn't care. The elementary school receptionist recognized her from volunteer days and PTA meetings. Looked concerned when Kate showed up at 10:15 on a Thursday morning. Ms. Williams, is everything okay? Is Emma? Everything's fine. Kate heard how that sounded. How desperate, how unhinged. Everything's better than fine. I just need to see her. Please. Something in Kate's face made the receptionist smile instead of call security. Let me get Mrs. Peterson. 5 minutes later, Emma came down the hallway holding her teacher's hand, confusion on her face, then worry when she saw her mother. Mama, what's wrong? Why are you here? Kate knelt down in the school hallway, other kids passing by, teachers watching. Didn't care about any of it. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Everything's right. Everything's finally right. Then why are you crying? Emma touched her face with her small hand. Happy tears, honey. Kate pulled her close. I did it. I helped the princess remember how to smile. Emma pulled back, studied her with those eyes that were too knowing for 8 years old. You did it. You helped her. We helped each other. Kate wiped her eyes. And Emma, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Mrs. Peterson appeared in the hallway, mid-50s, with kind eyes and the expression of a teacher who'd seen enough of life to recognize significant moments. Ms. Williams, is Emma okay? She's perfect. Kate stood, still holding Emma's hand. And I'm sorry to interrupt class, but I needed to tell her something that couldn't wait. Mrs. Peterson smiled, the smile of someone who understood. Sometimes the best lessons happen outside the classroom. Emma, why don't you take a few minutes with your mom? Come back when you're ready. They sat on a bench outside the school. Morning sun breaking through Seattle's clouds for the first time in days. Emma waited with the patience of a child who'd learned her mother didn't rush important things. You know how I work nights at that big company? Kate started. How I supervise the cleaning crew? Emma nodded. You clean so things are nice for the people who work there. That's right. Kate took a breath.
But before you were born, before your daddy died, I was studying to be a scientist at a very good school called MIT. Emma's eyes went wide. You were going to be a scientist? Like for real? Like for real. Kate smiled despite the tears. I was going to build computers that could help people, that could think and learn. Then why did you stop? Because Daddy died, and I had to make a choice. I could stay in school and finish, or I could drop out and take care of you. Take care of us. You chose me. Emma's voice was certain. I chose both of you. Kate squeezed her hand. And I thought that meant giving up being a scientist forever. I thought I'd used up my one chance. But you didn't. Emma spoke with the logic of someone following a story to its conclusion. The princess helped you remember. Kate laughed through the tears. Yes, sweetheart. Something like that. And last night the company offered me a new job. Not supervising cleaning, building things, important things. They want me to be a scientist again. Emma threw her arms around Kate's neck, nearly knocking her off the bench. I knew it. I knew you were special. I told Connor's dad you were the smartest person in the whole world and he didn't believe me, but I knew. When did you get so smart? Kate held her tight. Good genes. Emma pulled back, grinning. You're smart, and Daddy was smart, so I'm double smart. That's exactly right. Kate felt something loosening in her chest, something that had been locked tight since Michael died. Do you know what the man in charge said today? The general? Emma's eyes were wide. What? He said the best people aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who get back up. Kate touched her cheek. Like you and me. We fell down when Daddy died, but we got back up together. Emma was quiet for a moment, then her voice came out small. Mama, do you think Daddy knows about today? Kate's chest seized. Yeah, sweetheart. I think he knows. And I think he's really proud of both of us. Me too. Emma hugged her again. Can I go tell my class now? Can I tell them my mom is a scientist? You can tell them whatever you want. Kate kissed the top of her head. Even the part about cleaning offices. There's nothing wrong with any work that lets you take care of people you love. That's what Mrs. Peterson says too. Emma pulled back, kissed her cheek. I'm proud of you. I was always proud of you. But now I get to tell everyone else why. Emma ran back toward the school building, stopped at the door, and turned around one more time. Mama? Yeah? I love you to the moon and back. To the moon and back, sweetheart. The door closed behind her. Kate sat on the bench for a long time, sun on her face. Life changed. Future uncertain, but finally, full of possibility, instead of just survival. Her phone buzzed. Text from Morrison. Board approved your salary. Check your email. Also take the rest of the day off. Some things are more important than work. Mia's asking when she can meet the lady who helped her grandpa remember what matters. Kate opened the email, stared at the number. That was more than she'd made in 3 years as a supervisor. More than enough to stop choosing between rent and groceries. More than enough to give Emma the childhood she deserved. Second email from Rachel. Your office is on the 47th floor. Name's already on the door. Your team starts Monday. Welcome home. Third email from Maya. Boss. Yeah, you're my boss now. How weird is that? Helen and I already have 47 questions about the temporal decay algorithm. Can we take you to lunch next week? Also, congratulations. You earned this. Kate sat on the bench outside Emma's elementary school, wearing borrowed clothes because her janitor uniform was all she owned. Former supervisor, New lead systems architect, single mother, survivor, fighter, no longer unnoticed. And for the first time since Michael died, she let herself believe maybe this was just the beginning. 3 months later, Kate walked through Nexus Technologies' executive floor at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. Not pushing a cleaning cart, carrying a briefcase, wearing a suit that was hers, walking toward an office with her name on the door. Kate Williams, lead systems architect. Inside, she found everything Rachel had promised. Standing desk. 3 monitors already configured to her preferences. Coffee maker, because Helen was right about the executive machine being terrible. And on the wall, carefully taped in the center, was Emma's drawing from that morning. 2 stick figures standing on top of a tall building, one big and one small. Both smiling, both reaching toward stars drawn in purple crayon. Caption in careful 8-year-old handwriting, "Team Williams saves the universe." Kate hung it in the center of her wall. First thing, most important thing, the only thing that really mattered. Morrison knocked on the open door. He looked different, rested. There was lightness in his eyes that hadn't been there 3 months ago. "Ready for your first day?" Kate looked at the drawing, at her daughter's handwriting, at the years of struggle transformed into something that meant Emma would never have to choose between dreams and survival, the way she had. "Yeah, I'm ready." "Nervous?" Morrison leaned against the doorframe, terrified. Kate smiled. "Does it, Joe? Good. That means you care." Morrison straightened, about to leave, then paused. "Kate?" "Yeah." "Welcome home." His voice carried warmth that had nothing to do with professional courtesy and everything to do with 2 people who'd saved each other when they'd both forgotten how to save themselves. He left. Kate sat at her desk, turned on her computer, started the work she'd been born to do. And somewhere across Seattle, Emma Williams walked into her classroom and told everyone who would listen that her mom was a hero. Not because she was rich or famous or powerful. Because she never gave up. Because she showed up every single morning. Because she loved Emma enough to sacrifice everything and was brave enough to finally take it back. The afternoon sun streamed through her office windows, warming the space, making the numbers on her monitors glow. Kate pulled up the project timeline for the full military deployment. 6 months of work ahead. Challenges that would test everything she'd learned, everything she'd become. But this was just the foundation. The real work of saving lives would take years. Her phone buzzed. Emma's school. Emergency contact needed. Emma fell on playground. Minor scrape, but wants mom. Kate grabbed her keys without hesitation, sent a quick text to Morrison. "Family emergency. Emma needs me. Back in an hour." His response came immediately. "Go. That's what the job is for, so you can be there when it matters." Kate drove to the school, found Emma in the nurse's office with a bandaged knee and tears on her face that stopped the moment she saw her mother. "Mama, you came." "Always, sweetheart. Always." On the drive back to Nexus with Emma beside her, the school had agreed to let her finish the day with Kate at the office. Kate thought about Morrison sitting in that hospital with Mia 3 months ago, about the choice he'd made to finally put family first. About how that choice had been possible because Kate had been there to hold down the fort. About how they'd built something together that was bigger than either of them alone. Not just a system that saved lives, but a way of working that honored what actually mattered. Emma spent the afternoon drawing at Kate's desk while Kate worked, occasionally asking questions about the code on the screens, absorbing her mother's world, the way children do when they're allowed to be part of something important. At 5 p.m., Morrison stopped by Kate's office, saw Emma there, smiled. Bringing the next generation up right, I see. Emma looked up from her drawing. Are you Mr. Morrison? The one who gave my mom the scientist job? Morrison knelt down to Emma's eye level, the same way Kate always did. That's me. And I didn't give your mom anything. She earned it. She's brilliant. Emma nodded seriously. I know. She's always been brilliant. You just finally noticed. Morrison laughed. Real laugh that echoed in the office. You're absolutely right. We should have noticed sooner. He stood, looked at Kate. I'm heading out to have dinner with Jennifer and Mia. Want to join us? Both of you? Kate looked at Emma, who nodded enthusiastically. We'd love to. They went to an Italian place near Pike Place Market. Nothing fancy, but warm and full of families. Mia and Emma hit it off immediately, 8-year-olds finding that instant connection kids have. Jennifer and Kate talked about balancing work and motherhood, about the guilt and the joy and the constant feeling of not being enough for anyone. Morrison sat back and watched, and Kate realized he looked happier than she'd ever seen him. Not because the company was successful, because his family was together, because he'd finally figured out what mattered. After dinner, driving home with Emma sleepy in the passenger seat, Kate thought about the long road from that conference room at midnight to this moment, about all the small choices that had led here, the decision to pick up that marker, the courage to walk into the boardroom, the faith to believe she could be both scientist and mother, that she didn't have to choose. Mama? Emma's voice was drowsy. Yeah, sweetheart. Today was a good day. Yeah, honey, it was. Can we have more days like this? Kate reached over, squeezed her hand. That's the plan. That night, after Emma was asleep, Kate sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and finally opened the box she'd kept sealed since Michael's funeral. His things. The items that had hurt too much to look at, that she'd packed away the week after he died and never touched again. Inside was his MIT class ring, his engineering textbooks, notes in the margins in his careful handwriting, photos from their graduate school days, both of them young and hopeful and certain the future was theirs to shape. And at the bottom, a letter, addressed to Kate in Michael's handwriting. She'd never seen it before, didn't know it existed. Her hands shook as she opened it. My dearest Katie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm writing this in the hospital while you're asleep in the chair next to my bed. 6 months pregnant and so strong it breaks my heart. The doctors say I probably won't make it through the night. They're wrong about a lot, but I think they're right about this. I need you to know something, and I'm writing it down because I know you. I know how you'll blame yourself, how you'll think you should have stayed in school, should have chosen differently, should have been more or less or something other than exactly who you are. Don't. You dropping out to be with me wasn't sacrifice, Katie. It was love. And love isn't something you calculate like an equation. It's something you live. But here's what I need you to promise me. Don't let my dying be the end of your becoming. You're 26 years old. You have 50, 60, maybe 70 years ahead of you. You're going to want to hide, to make yourself small, to tell yourself that Katie the scientist died with Michael the engineer, and all that's left is Katie the mom. That's a lie. You can be both. You have to be both. Not for me, for Emma. So she grows up knowing that women don't have to choose, that setbacks aren't endings, that the people who fall down and get back up are the ones who change the world. When the door opens, and it will open because brilliant people can't stay hidden forever,
Walk through it. Be scared. Be imperfect. Be everything you are, not just the parts that feel safe. Promise me. I love you. I loved watching you light up when you solved impossible problems. I loved how your accent got thicker when you were excited about your work. Don't let my death erase that light. Our daughter deserves to see it. Forever yours, Michael P. S. Tell Emma her dad said, "The bravest thing anyone can do is try again after everything falls apart." That's not just survival. That's victory. Kate sat at her kitchen table and cried. But they weren't sad tears. They were the tears of someone finally understanding that every choice she'd made, dropping out, surviving, hiding, emerging, had been leading to this moment. To becoming someone who could hold both scientist and mother, both survivor and thriver, both unnoticed and essential. She folded the letter carefully, added it to Emma's box of precious things. One day, when Emma was older, she'd understand. Would see that her mother's journey wasn't about choosing between being present and being brilliant. It was about finding the courage to be both. Kate Williams went to bed that night in her small apartment that would soon be a bigger place in a better neighborhood, with her daughter sleeping safely down the hall and a career that finally matched her capabilities. She went to bed knowing that tomorrow she'd wake up and make pancakes and braid Emma's hair and walk her to the bus stop. And then she'd go change the world. Because that's what happens when overlooked people refuse to stay hidden. When broken people refuse to stay broken. When someone finally sees you for who you really are and gives you a chance to prove it. You don't just take the chance. You transform it into something bigger than yourself. Into proof that credentials tell you what someone learned. Experience tells you what someone lived. But results tell you who someone is. And Kate Williams was someone who refused to stay unnoticed. Someone who turned survival into triumph. Someone who proved that the most important people are the ones nobody's looking at, until they decide to be seen. And then, everything changes.